Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Today we've got something a bit different. This is the Conquer Aging or Die Trying podcast, episode 1. And today we've got Crissman Loomis, who is a former AI programmer, a mathematician, health and longevity researcher, and he's the owner and operator of Unaging, unaging.com. So if you're interested in that, check out his site. So we've got a lot to go through, and where should we start, Chris? And
Well,
welcome.
let's see. Thank you. I'm really happy to be talking to you. We've been talking back and forth for a while, having great conversations. And what I was really interested and struck by is that we have sort of a similar routine in a lot of ways. And so I think where we should start from is how kind of what the philosophy is like. How do you decide what it is that you want to add to your routine? If you're looking at a food or an exercise or a habit, how do you what's your benchmark, what's your weighing point for deciding what you want to do to live the longest, healthiest life you can? So I'll put it over to you first.
Yeah. So starting with the 5 habits that get life expectancy to an average of around 90 years for both women and men. And for those who don't know, I'll link to all the papers that we're going to talk about in the video's description. So check that out if you're interested. But those included a BMI less than 25. Okay, check. Not smoking, check. Moderate alcohol intake. So I'm not on that, and we can discuss why. But I'm not opposed to alcohol intake. It's just, it's an almost never thing. And then exercise dose. So getting more than 6 hours per week. I'm just below that. I'm in the 4 to 6 hour range. So I'm just below. And then a quote unquote healthy diet by the alternative healthy diet eating index. Having a high dietary score versus a low dietary score puts you in the highest category. All right. So that's just getting you to 90. So as you know, the name of the channel is Conquer Aging or Die Trying. So, you know, we've got to find ways beyond just those general recommendations to potentially push that curve out further. So where I see the two biggest places to impact, maybe potentially three, with, you know, specifically titrating BMI is, you know, BMI of 24 versus 21. That's very debatable, but we could even get into how would I or others potentially decide what is the best BMI that potentially maximizes their health and maybe longevity. But I see the two biggest places to intervene as exercise dose and diet quality, and even going beyond what's you know, touted as the high dietary quality. So, so which subdivision do you want to take there first, the dietary quality or the exercise dose?
Well, let's see. Let me answer my own question first. Oh, by the way, as you might notice, I have a walking desk and a background for that. So nice day for a walk in the park today. Um, like when I first started to read your stuff, I think I might have even found your content because I was looking for sort of a blood aging, a blood test to figure out what age you are according to your blood test results. So getting your normal blood panel and being able to look at that. And then from seeing that, I've seen that in a lot of your stuff, you're looking very closely at sort of the epigenetic indicators or other things and the testing things. So for myself, my background is not I'm not a medical degree. I'm more on the analytical doctor side or the quantitative mathematical side of things. So what I'm looking for when I'm looking at an intervention, and I'm well familiar also with the 5 factors that you talk about, and they're a great place to start from. And so for going beyond that, how to get beyond 90 years old, I'm looking for things that will affect all-cause mortality. So this is the best sort of general criteria across the board. There's so much advice out there about what you can do in order to live longer, and it's really hard to prioritize. You can make it your entire job, or like some people like Brian Johnson has in fact made it almost his entire job, just trying to keep up with all the innovations. But without knowing which one's the most important, it's it can become confusing. So I try to bring everything back into an epidemiological study of some kind that shows how much it actually increases or your lifespan by reducing premature death, and then take a look at that. So when I'm looking at my interventions, I'm always looking at what's the effect on all-cause mortality. Does it reduce premature death? And if so, by how much? And then I can model that to say, okay, well, this is more important than this. and then also put it in, well, yeah, but that takes more time or whatever. And then that's how I decide what I want to do. And I think on that one, I think we should start to answer your question. I think we should start with the physical activity, the
Uh,
exercise.
Wait, so before going there, I
Okay,
just
go
want to
ahead.
mention that obviously all-cause mortality data is a humongous part of my approach, but it gets to the idea of, okay, general recommendations are good. Taking that a step further, all-cause mortality data. But then even taking that a step further, I integrate how a given biomarker changes during aging. So for example, before going into that, um, fruit and vegetable intake has been, in epidemiological studies, shows that risk, all-cause mortality risk is maximally reduced somewhere between 5 and 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. But what if your total intake of fruits and vegetables is far beyond that? What if it's 20 or 30 or whatever servings per day, beyond what's been published, right? So now you're in this quote unquote healthy user bias group where there is no data. So
Yep.
how do you push beyond the epidemiological studies when there's no data, which gets into the also a big part of my approach, which is biomarkers and looking at as many biomarkers of organ and systemic function as possible. Now, even there's nuance because the reference range isn't the quote unquote optimal range because it isn't designed for health and longevity. It's just, are you in that range? And if you're outside, potentially it's disease. And if you're below the range, it's potentially disease. But you may be getting progressively worse in that range, increasing or decreasing over many years, still within the range. So I look at the aging data for a given biomarker and its all-cause mortality data to come up with a what's optimal. And then in addition, well, what's youthful, and then try to push all of my data, which for most people probably think you can't change these things or slow these things down. But the fact is they can be measured. So I use diet and exercise and trying to optimize sleep and whatever supplements, right? To try to optimize kidney and liver and cardiovascular, everything comprehensively, not just metabolic health, but with the goal of having as youthful of a biochemistry as possible for as long as possible. So, okay, with that in mind, I guess we get into the
Yeah.
exercise
So,
dose.
right. So now, and that's you're right. Like your approach is that's why I enjoy talking to you. One of the reasons I enjoy talking to you so much is because it gives some immediate visibility beyond what you can find in epidemiological studies for, right? Like you're saying, okay, for some of the ranges are based off of basically, are you average, right? And we're trying to shoot for far beyond average. So right in the area of physical activity, of exercise. So I think the study that you talked about is a great example. The Harvard, the Chan Harvard Public Health study, where they go through that and they talk about getting a certain amount of exercise. And the people who are in the highest quintile of exercise got around 8 more years of life, right?
Yep.
It was the most significant, I mean, after not smoking a lot, it was the most important intervention that they were able to make. Um, but I think that that's a good example where the government suggestion is going to get you average, right? Generally, what you'll hear is you'll hear something like, you should get around 150 minutes of medium or high intensity exercise in a week, right? And then that then says, okay, well, if it's high intensity, then maybe 75 or so. But from going through the studies to say, okay, well, what's the effect on all-cause mortality? I find that there's actually very different categories within exercise that need to be hit. Just as doing 150 minutes is going to get you some benefit, if you actually break it down and you say, okay, I'm going to do this much strength training, I'm going to do this much aerobic training, and then I'm going to do this much high intensity interval training, I think that you can put the pieces together and get more benefit in terms of all-cause mortality, specifically in reduction of premature death, than if you were to just, I don't know, play soccer for 150 minutes.
Yeah, I hear that. That's a more specific approach than just general recommendations based on how many hours of your are you exercising and dividing it into resistance training, cardio, etc. But if you look at the graded dose on that curve, where people who are in the, I think, 3.5 or 4 to 6 hours, and then more than 6 hours per week of moderate to vigorous exercise per week, which moderate includes just walking, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the 4 to 6 hour per week group was about 6 hours of increased life expectancy. And as you mentioned, 8 years for the greater than 6 hours.
Mhm.
No matter how you cut that, it seems like there's a graded response, just at least in terms of duration. But what's going to be the life expectancy gain for the subdivision that you mentioned, when considering that, we're going from 6 hours, 6 years to 8 years? Is it going to be 15 years? Is it going to be 20? I don't see a big jump coming from that, which then I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, which goes down to specificity. How can we get more? I hear what you're saying, which kind of gets us on that road towards more precise dose, right? But this comes down to biomarkers, right? And how would you know what the appropriate amount of resistance training for you, and cardio for you, right? And all of the total duration for you. For some people, maybe they do great on 10 hours total exercise per week, no matter how you cut it up, right? Some people may be doing better on 3 hours per week. And I say better by looking the full complement of all their biomarkers, not just strength and VO2 max, but like kidney and liver and, inflammation, et cetera. So that's how I look at it. Now, the argument against that is there's no published data on what kind of life expectancy gain will you get by using a biomarker-driven approach to titrate exercise dose. There's just no data. It doesn't exist, right? So this is where I'm okay to differ from everybody. And, so now we can have a bell curve distribution where my data will be an outlier because there's no previous data to guide me on that, right? So I'm either going to be on the left side, which it was a disaster. I'll have an average benefit, or maybe I'll have the greatest benefit. Maybe I'll push it to 15 years. So we can get into specifics because people are like, what are the specifics?
Yeah.
How would you do that?
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah. So let's do the specifics. What's your, in a 1 week, what do you do? How would you describe it? I've seen your videos, of course, but it'd be for those who haven't seen them, maybe to describe what's your workout routine.
Yeah. Well, in addition to just the workout routine, so I'm doing right now it's 2 90-minute workouts per week. Those workouts include weightlifting, calisthenics, mobility, flexibility, balance, a little bit of Taekwondo stuff. Just the goal is to optimize muscle mass and function for as long as physically possible to attenuate any potential age-related decline. The workout is completely standardized. I know exactly how many sets and reps of each movement that I'm doing. These are compound movements. I'm almost never doing bicep curls and tricep push downs, these single joint movements. It's, pull-ups and push-ups off a ball, so for the extra resistance, over shoulder press, deadlifts. But so that 90-minute workout. Now, after each 90-minute workout, because I'm tracking things like heart rate variability and resting heart rate, we've got to remember that exercise is a stressor. And for those who are going to try to misinterpret my words, I know that there are maybe some that are out there, and I won't name names. Exercise is a stressor. Now, I'm not saying that in a negative light. It's a hormetic stressor, which means in the short term, that's chronic stress, or that acute stress. Over the long term, we will become more resilient against and develop our systems to better resist that stress. Now, there's going to be an upper limit, and I've used this analogy before. In baseball, there are some pitchers who can throw 200 innings, 250 innings. It used to be 300 innings in the 1970s. And now baseball has been, reduced to where we're afraid of your injury risk, based on no data. And then you've got 60-inning pitchers who try to get stretched out into 200-inning pitchers, but then they get injured. So they probably didn't have that genetics. Now, the analogy of that story is, are you a 60-inning pitcher? Are you a 200-inning pitcher? Are you a high volume exercise athlete? Are you a medium volume athlete? What volume of exercise is best for your physiology? So this goes to the idea of stress. How much stress can your body tolerate? Now, before finishing that road, I've seen people say, well, just do more and continuously do more over time. Your body will adapt. This is false. This may be true for a select amount of people, but in tracking my own data, even just looking at heart rate variability, resting heart rate, even looking at deadlifts and squats and volume of exercise. For me, there is a volume of exercise which optimizes strength and function over time. And if I go beyond that, I'm increasing injury risk, I'm overtrained, and now I'm in that chronically stressed biochemistry, where is that going to be best for optimizing maximum lifespan? Maybe I get an increase in average lifespan because we all know about the health benefits and, average lifespan increase for exercise, but I want to get to the maximum. So I want to get that hormetic dose. I want to get that hormetic benefit in terms of health and average lifespan, but I also want to minimize any overstress above that, where now I'm reducing my ability to potentially get to the maximum. So that's the that's the long-winded nutshell.
Okay. Yeah. So from the biomarker point of view, it's about tuning that kind of thing. So from my point of view, from looking at the all-cause mortality, I'm very sensitive for each of those vectors components that I talked about for the high intensity, the aerobic, and the strength training. I'm very sensitive to when was the longevity benefit reached and maximized, and after what point was it no longer helpful. So you talk about some people thinking that they want to run every inning, every game, all season long. And actually, I think we've had a bit of a discussion. I'm not sure if you remember it, where I've said, I think you're doing too much at 90 minutes, 180 minutes a week. Like my routine for exercise is actually one is two 25-minute runs, and then about a half hour long strength training exercise interval. And so my total time is actually under 90 minutes
Right.
and 1 week.
But you're doing more in terms of the walking on the non-exercise days, whereas on those days are quote unquote recovery days for me, where it's very low volume.
Right. Yeah, the walking desk is key for getting a 20,000, 40,000 step day is pretty standard for me.
So
But
along those lines, on days where my step counts have been as high as that, my resting heart rate and heart rate variability take a very long time to recover. So when I first started on this journey in 2018 with the tracking the heart rate variability, resting heart rate, my data looked chronically overtrained. An average heart rate variability of 47 and an average resting heart rate of 51. Now, I was doing 3-hour workouts, and I know people are going to call BS on that, but for whatever reason, I've said this before, I have gorilla genetics where I just like throwing heavy weights around for a very long time. I like the challenge of doing it for a very long time because it feels good to do like 10 sets of squats and 10 sets of bench or whatever. But it was just murder on my, and I felt, cognitively,
wow.
I felt terrible for like a week. And then I couldn't make consistent strength gains, even just maintaining strength if I can't train for a week, strength train, that's not my optimum window just from trial and error for being able to maintain or increase it over time. So I've cut that down a lot. Now, in terms of the 90 minutes now being too much, the argument against that is pull-ups. All of my strength indices have not declined, at least over the past 5 years. Overhead press, consecutive push-ups off the ball, the rows, all of the fitness metrics that I look at, even flexibility, nothing has declined. If anything, there's a small increase in certain areas. And also a big part of that too is avoiding injury risk. And I've had a history of lower back herniations from ego lifting in my 20s. So even that too, I've been able to minimize that. So the argument against that I'm currently still doing too much is no strength change. No, basically I've maintained strength. Now people can say, oh, you're maintaining strength, but we both know you can't increase forever. You're gonna hit that above average fitness level. And then the trick is how long can you stay there, right? So that's one side of it. The other side of it is the heart rate variability and resting heart rate as those measures of stress are both better, significantly better, not by a little bit, by a lot over the past 5 years. So if I was doing too much, the argument would be, well, your metrics of overall stress aren't great, so that's the argument against that I'm currently doing too much.
That's yeah, so let me refine my point. I don't think that you're doing enough to be harmful. I think that you could get the same benefit even if you were to tune it more finely, and that you could maintain the same benefit. I've been doing the weightlifting for about let's say I think it's about 8 years now, and have the same thing, kind of reached the max and have held steady at that point. With just one weightlifting exercise term a week for about half an hour. And I'm hitting the bigs, like it's deadlifts or squats, bench, incline, decline, or flat, and back exercise, lat pull downs or rows or something else. those are the big ones. Those are the key, and that's all you need to do. As you said, no bicep curls, no like try, kind of push down kind of things. But you hit the big ones, and then that takes care of it. Weightlifting, as you found out before, has a kind of a sharp curve on it, actually, for the benefit. The studies will say, as you sent over before, and we can link in the comments, that if you're exercising over 2 hours total time in a week, you're actually not getting any more longevity out of it. Your premature death is now the same as if you'd never walked into the gym. But if you're doing a mixture of things like you're doing, where you're getting your aerobic in there, you're getting some other activities as well, your weightlifting time, it's within the right window. As long as you're under an hour, you're still getting the peak benefit out of it. Once you get over a total time of weightlifting, strength training alone in a week, then it starts to, you're no longer at peak. And once you're over 2 hours, now you're actually, I think it's actually 2.5 hours if I remember correctly. Then at that point, it's worse than if you had never gone to the gym.
Yeah, I should clarify. So it's not 90 minutes of all weightlifting. It's far
Right.
from that. And as I mentioned, I've had to cut down the training volume for the strength training portion of the workouts because it's just not, I want to cover all of the bases and all of the movements from a variety of angles. So, for example, for my overhead press, I'm doing a warm-up set and basically 2 work sets, right? So that's essentially for all of the compound movements. At most, it's the same idea. It's like a warm-up set and then 2 work sets with kind of a pyramid. The first work set is maybe 70% of 1 RM, and the second being 85, or so 85% or so higher. So if I looked at total strength training as a portion of that, it might be 45 minutes, maybe a bit less. But then even then, how do you quantify? Because it's almost like a circuit training workout too, where it's a 90-minute workout. And granted, it used to be an 80-minute workout, and I have made it close to a 90-minute workout because I'm starting to. Like I said, I like the challenge. I like the challenge of pushing myself for as long as But again, I have to follow the data and not overtrain it. But
Right.
if you looked at say I'm doing 12 work sets total for the compound movements, upper and lower body, maybe it's 15, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Total work time in each set is maybe 1 to 2 minutes. I'm not doing like 1 RMs. I'm trying to get, the combination of strength and endurance, like overhead press 70 times, 12 reps. Like I'm not doing 4 reps or 2 reps. So that may take 1 to 2 minutes at most. So if I'm doing at most 15 sets total,
Mm-hmm.
at 1 to 2 minutes, that's like 30 minutes of strength of actual movement time during strength training. There's very little sitting around and screwing off on the computer in between. There's very little of that. I try to minimize that as much as possible. So yeah, the actual strength training portion, if we really quantified it, is a small part. But yeah, that's what works for me. Other people maybe can get away with doing more often, more frequently. Now, the other aspect of this, and we've talked about this before, is why not cut the workout up and split the routine over many days. And now I've got to juggle with my in-person, the deal, but most people may not. I've got to juggle around the in-person work schedule. And for whatever reason, even just doing like a 45-minute workout or a shorter workout, my data, in terms of the fitness metrics, may not be recovered enough and start to look overtrained the day after or the second day after, where if I then include another workout, so on a Monday and then a Wednesday, when that Friday comes to repeat the Monday workout, I may not be recovered enough. And I say may, I've tried it in the past, where then the Friday workout, which was supposed to be the second version of the Monday workout, I've got to push that to allow for recovery. And when I do that, I start to throw the whole system off. At most, day 1, day 5, so Monday, Friday, I can maintain strength. That's what's worked to maintain strength over time. But if I get into 6 days after doing any portion of my workout, and if that's a consistent thing over time, once every, Monday, Saturday, Monday, Sunday, it's harder for me to maintain strength. I start to see strength decrements. Yeah, so the long story short is I have to juggle around the in-person work schedule, which dedicates some amount of, heart rate increase, which slows recovery. And I'm getting no fitness benefit from it. If I could make my own schedule and have my own, timesheet for how often I would work out, how much I would do, I'd be able to get in hit on the non 90-minute workout days. and a lot more mobility work and joint work, knees and ankles,
Hmm.
flexibility wise, but in time, that's for sure on the to-do list.
Yeah, so that I think that covers sort of the strength training side of it. And the aerobic is like another key one. Um, the aerobic can be done from what I've seen in the studies, and also looking specifically at the mitochondrial level, where they're looking at the sort of the growth of mitochondria. The most important part about the aerobic is getting a regular dosage every week. Like the studies seem to show that for the benefit for all-cause mortality reduction, basically happens at like after the first 15 minutes of aerobic, and then after that, it's pretty much flat. And there are other benefits that come from the aerobic, right? Like there's sort of like the energetic feeling of it. Lots of people just love running because they love running. But in the terms of all-cause mortality, you only see the benefit for like the first 15 minutes. So I do a 25. Even I can't bring myself just to doing the minimum 15 minutes a week, but about the 25 minutes of the aerobic. But that one, it doesn't have the sharp curve like lifting weights. Like you can very easily overstress your body lifting weights too much. But people can run a lot and still be pretty good. Like for you, your 90 minutes, probably the stressful part of it is probably more the weightlifting than the aerobic running. Would you agree with that? Does that sound right?
But it's a cumulative. It's funny. I took a screenshot yesterday of my stress, the stress monitor that Whoop has.
Right.
You
Yeah.
look at if you look at it during the workout, it's going up the whole time, during my
Ah,
workout, right? So the argument there is it's a the whole workout, just the duration of it's pretty. I mean, I guess it's pretty high intensity, right? So
right. You're getting cardiovascular drift. That's what they
that's
call
right.
it, where your heart rate just keeps on going up as
Yep,
you continue to
exactly.
run or jog, right?
Yeah, but in terms of the 15 minutes, that's probably for high intensity for the hit training, right? Whereas in terms of VO2 max, it's I think half of the benefit of VO2 max is association with all-cause mortality. Um, it's like after a VO2 max of 40, most of the benefit is up to about 40, and then there's a small, it's like a 10% further reduction to go from a VO2 max of 40 to 50, something like that. So someone who's out there saying, oh, I'll only have to do 15 minutes a week of hit. I mean, the question is, did it get your VO2 max to at least 40 to get most of the benefit? For some people,
Mhm.
maybe that's not enough. They may need more for whatever reason, right? So
Right. The sort of the non-responder issue for that. I mean, the another point that I want to make, that I kind of think of a lot, is that there's oftentimes questions of, okay, well, I don't walk as much as I think I should, or I don't do as much of the aerobic as I should, or I don't like going to the gym. But I do this other thing, like, okay, I don't walk as much, but I run for an hour or something like that. And from what I've read and seen from the studies, they seem all to be different buckets. So it's sort of like each of those activities, like aerobic exercise, high intensity exercise, strength training, and walking, those are sort of what I consider to be the four fundamental components of physical activity. For each of them, you can get a certain amount of benefit out of doing them. And if you don't do them, you miss that benefit. But there's no makeup and there's no overlap. Like even if you're running, let's say, an hour a day, you will still get additional longevity from walking another 2 hours a day, right? So each of them seem to be, and in one way you could say that you're making up for it, because some of the longevity you didn't get from that you can get from something else, but you could have also eaten vegetables and fruits, right? So it's interesting that the components then seem to basically be different kind of aspect of some way of slowing down the aging process so that you can get the benefit from it. So that's why I think it's really important just to break it down and making sure that you're hitting each of the buckets and at least getting the requisite amount inside of that. The hit then is like another one, and that's like another about 15 minutes or so a week, like you say, when then regularly every week we'll give you another building for that, and the VO2 max will increase and other things. So
So
yeah.
I prefer, so this is why I prefer greater specificity, and which can kind of address that, right? So,
Mhm.
is the combination of that approach, is that, and then the amount of time spent and volume of training, is that able to maintain your fitness level, strength, VO2 max, whatever cardiovascular fitness metrics you want to track, heart rate variability, resting heart rate, et cetera, blood pressure, all the things that come with exercise. Is that total volume and frequency and intensity and duration, is that enough to at least maintain it over time? That's the big question. Then, so that's part of it. The other part of it is, another aspect, you said those are the four main pillars, but another aspect is, and I think most people overlook it, is mobility and flexibility training, which and balance, if you're not training that stuff's going to get worse too. And joint joint health, right? So the idea that you can just take glucosamine or hyaluronic acid or something and have quote unquote good joint health. Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit, but we can, there are pretty good YouTube channels out there, knees over toes, that whole approach where, you can do a variety of movements aimed at increasing blood flow to your joints and increasing strength, in the joints, which, training through a full range of motion, which unfortunately most people probably are ignoring. And even just focusing on like low back hamstring flexibility, which as a former personal trainer, training people in their 70s who never worked on these things, that could barely flex, just barely flex their spine at that age from a lifetime of neglect. I wouldn't just put it on strength and VO2 max and, running, walking. I wouldn't put it on that. It's mobility through a full range of motion. And what's interesting too, is if you look at older people who even mildly fit people who ignored their mobility or joint range of motion over time, you can tell by just someone's movement pattern or their gait, but from a lifetime of disuse. For example, getting up off the floor, and I don't mean sitting, crisscross applesauce. I mean, just how quickly can you get off the floor? Someone older, chronologically older, who's never trained it, versus someone chronically older who's actually mobile and has trained those things. There's just a youthful aspect to it. So independent of the strength and cardiovascular, there's something about mobility, balance, and flexibility that there's a huge youthful component that I think most people ignore. For example, there's another guy, I think his name is Movements by David, and his catchphrase is "Stay flexy." And this guy's mobility is fantastic. I mean, it's like gymnast. It's like Cirque du Soleil level. And one of his YouTube videos is, I'm small, but I'm strong. And if you look at the feats of mobility and calisthenics that he's doing, it's just, it's amazing. So the long story short is, I think that's why the part of my workout is so long, is I'm trying to incorporate, I've always tried to incorporate some aspect of the mobility and joint and flexibility and balance. But that's an easier said than done thing, because, we sit at a desk all day, and long story short is the back can get tight. So you got to do a lot. I've got to do a lot to really warm it up and strengthen it. And so.
Yeah, the balance is one that definitely degrades as you get old. And the studies on it have not looked hopeful. Like when I've looked at the ones where they talk about your time, say, standing on one foot for the older people, and older, we're talking 80s and 90s, not the new middle age of 50s. They're like measured in like under 10 seconds. And when they do interventions at that age, they really don't find any useful improvement. So it does seem to be something that you really need to keep in. One of the things I can't even remember where I saw it is brush your teeth with your eyes closed while doing the yoga tree position, right? So I ride my bicycle around and make sure that I'm always doing a certain amount of time riding with no hands, like I did when I was a kid, right? Just trying to make sure that I keep the balance up. For the stretching, I feel that I get enough of the stretching from the weightlifting. Like a good squat will help your hamstrings and other things, right? And the studies show that actually they do a head-to-head of stretching exercises and then strength training. And they find that actually they got more increase in flexibility from doing the strength training than from actually doing a stretching exercise.
Just to add on to that, so you're exactly right. So doing a weighted squat should have greater flexibility than doing an unweighted squat, because you're basically pushing yourself, you're forcing yourself down with extra gravity, right? But there are there are people who will only train to 90 degrees, and that's not a full range of motion. And we've been brainwashed. I
Ah,
hate to
okay.
say, I hate to pull the conspiracy theory garbage, but we've been taught, or we've heard it forever, that you've only got to go to 90 degrees. And how many bodybuilders have I seen that train to 90 degrees? But that's not a full range of motion for the squat, right? So
Uh-huh.
sure, you'll have better range of motion than if you didn't do any squats at all. But
Hmm.
there's ankle flexibility, there's shoulder flexibility. I mean, these are all things that can be trained to their full range of motion, and then adding a strength training component to it, to which what should further improve flexibility in that movement. So I've got room to go for some of those movements. My squats are pretty decent, but I've got an ankle problem that goes back to being tackled at high school football. Almost I had a hairline fracture, so my flexibility there isn't great. So I've got to do a lot of work on my squat depth, which is somewhat limited because of my ankle mobility. But
Ah,
yeah, but in terms of the gain, for me, it goes back to that, that mobile phenotype, right? Not just balance on the bike or balance with your eyes closed, just
mhm.
it goes back to having a youthful movement pattern. And that's not something you can just like Deepak Chopra and say, I feel young, so I'm young. It's something I think that has to be trained for a very
Huh.
long time. I never want to get up off the floor and someone look at me and it's like my parents, like when I see them get up off the floor or a couch, that's an old pattern. And I'm not trying to be an ageist or in, that kind of boat, but they haven't trained it, right?
Mhm.
And I could try my best to get up and look spry, but without actively training it, it's going to look aged, so.
Yeah, I try and do the other thing that I'll do is do some kind of Tabata workouts or something, sort of a very high intensity workout, and something like burpees inside of that, right? Like a 20 seconds of burpees, right? Where you're jumping as high as you can and then going down to a push-up and then jumping. And that's the kind of thing that really gives you the mobility, sort of the ability to dynamically react to the world around you. But yeah, it's I keep it as a small part of mine, but for you it's sort of a major thing, and especially if you've had some injuries and things that sort of require a bit of attention to it. I can understand that.
Yeah. But the other aspect of it too is, for example, like stretching and strengthening the low back while also stretching and strengthening the hamstrings. So
Hmm.
for example, doing like an L, right? Where I'm basically, my body straight up and then I'm leaning forward like this, right? So it's kind of like a good morning like that.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
but doing that now, I'm holding a weight, I'm holding 45-pound weight. And, I'm not touching the floor. I'm just trying to hold this position for as long as I can. So I'm
Hmm.
getting that hamstring stretch, and I'm also getting the strengthening in the lower back and the hamstrings. But then I'll
Huh.
get rid of the 45-pound weight, and then I'll do the full, even standing off the chair, so I can get way beyond putting my knuckles to the floor. So now I'm
Hmm.
getting strength through a full range of motion. So a little bit is warming up the back, but it's also
Hmm.
strength through that full range of motion. Um, touching my toes, that's not, that's a partial range of motion. It's knuckles to
Hmm.
the floor and even going further beyond that, but also adding that weight to be strong in that movement, not just flexible. So
I'm bad at that stuff, to be honest. I can touch my toes, but I'm not putting my palms on the floor at any time.
yeah, and the argument against that, you could say, well, what's the all-cause mortality data? And I,
Exactly. And that's kind of like I haven't seen, it
right.
doesn't show up in the all-cause mortality stuff. So I'm like, all right, I'll put some time into that, but it's not going to be my primary focus.
But for me, it goes to the quality of life and
Hmm.
being highly mobile at any age and never and trying to avoid that aged movement pattern that I see chronically in older adults that haven't trained it. So, uh,
Right.
and if imagine you drop something on the floor and you've got to bend down to pick it up. And if it's hard to touch your toes, that's going to look like an aged movement pattern. I don't want that. I
Huh.
like, if I drop, so if I'm at the grocery store and I'm trying to get like a pepper from the top and it falls on the floor, I can pick it up from the floor, no problem. I'm not like, oh no, I got to bend down and pick it up. I'm never worried about that. And maybe that seems like an inconsequential thing, but again, this idea, and I keep saying it, but age movement pattern, I'm trying to avoid that forever, indefinitely.
Hmm. Well, it's yeah, keeping it moving. So should we swoop over to anything else that you wanted to say about the exercise stuff?
We got it.
Okay. Should we jump over into food then?
Yeah, let's do it. What do you got?
So let's see. So I'll start off on this one. So my diet is somewhat less strict than yours. And thank you for that, by the way, because my friends all think that I'm, really very precise in what I eat. And I'm like, yeah, you think that, but boy, this guy, Dr. Garden, writes down every gram he eats every single day. So for the food things as well, I think it comes down to some fundamental categories of food. And the interesting thing is I've gone through the all-cause mortality studies, is that they seem to say that basically it's not about the subcategory. So it's not about eating, say, bananas versus kiwis versus oranges. It's about how much fruit you're eating. It's not about eating green salad versus potatoes. It's about how much vegetables you're eating. And so it seems that, and people spend a huge amount of time trying to figure out, oh my God, I need a different colors, antioxidants or something, this kind of thing. But as I look across the studies, they say that basically they're all the same thing, and those seem to be the same bucket, right? So if you've eaten, say, 3 servings of potatoes, poor maligned white potatoes, that you're not going to get additional benefit from, say, eating some cucumber and some lettuce after that. Like, you've already hit your allotment of what you could get as the benefit from the fruits. And so for each of the foods, there seems to be a very clear benefit from it, or disadvantage. For the things that are bad for you, they're sometimes bad for you throughout the entire range. But my favorite example is nuts. And there have been several studies that have shown that a very small portion of nuts, like less than an ounce, like if we're talking a very small handful daily, is one of the greatest reductions in premature death that you can do. It's a 17 or so % reduction in all-cause mortality. And the funny thing about it is that that's just for that first half handful. And then after that, there's no additional benefit. So if you like nuts, go ahead and keep on eating them. There's no harm to it, but you're not getting any further reductions in all-cause mortality. And for each of the components, say nuts, beans or legumes, fruits, vegetables, red meat, processed meat, all those things, there's very distinct curves that say this is how much you should get and this is the benefit you'll get. And then after this, well, if you like it, sure, it's fine, but you're getting no more benefit from it. So my diet is basically to get beyond just the alternative health eating index. I really rigorously go through and try to follow those basic guidelines. But to be honest, there's a lot of room in there. I haven't been able to find studies that show the benefit of, say, eating more than even 1 serving of fruits and 1 serving of vegetables having that much of an impact on all-cause mortality. And that's one of the places where we differ. Where I know that you're looking at the biomarkers and you're saying, well, yeah, but my biomarker is got a different benefit. But when you're just going sort of like where the all-cause mortality comes, I have a healthy breakfast, a very healthy breakfast. I get about 2 or 3 whole grain servings, oatmeal, wheat berries kind of things. I have some salad beans in that as well, and then some hummus and some veggies and some fruit, and of course, a small handful of nuts. And that covers a lot of what I need for the day. If I have a salad later on in the day for some more vegetables and things and some fish for dinner, which is another very healthy food, it's going to cover most of what I need. And then after that, your cheat days are kind of a normal day for me. I'll have a croissant or something almost any day. I think that sugar is overly vilified in the culture these days. It seems to like the great evil. But that's sort of how I run it as far as the component style of it. But feel free to tell me what the biomarkers say about that.
All right, before going to the biomarkers, the biggest, the I don't want to say the lowest hanging fruit could be total calories. What dietary approach can lead you to being able to take in an amount of calories that allows you to be your leanest, assuming that your leanest is going to end up reflecting your most youthful biomarker profile. For example, in my data, blood pressure, which is potentially a big one for like dementia risk, and systolic blood pressure increases during aging, thereby potentially increasing dementia risk. In my data, body weight, which is largely driven by a modest calorie restriction over time, as I haven't increased the exercise duration, frequency, or intensity. Body weight is one of the most significantly correlated with blood pressure in my data. Now, knowing that calories are driving that, which that again goes back to what dietary approach can lead one to their, the calorie intake that allows them to be the leanest. Now, is it going to be a junk food diet? Is it the Mike cheat day as the Chris's every day?
Normal day. It's a Tuesday. Yeah.
If I did that every day, I'd be overeating, and I don't mean not overeating by a couple hundred calories a day. I mean, 4,000, 7,000, whatever. I can't, that's why I have to cut those cheat days to a very infrequent thing, because beyond that, it encourages in my brain, bad behavior. So some people, now this is where another one goes beyond the published studies. I'm not a dietary ideologist, meaning, vegan versus vegetarian versus even carnivore, which there's very little published data on all-cause mortality risk, because, and again, I'm not trying to promote any one diet, right? So each diet can lead you to your most satiated, where you can have some amount of calorie restriction while also maintaining muscle mass, so that you can optimize and maintain function over time. I think that may be the biggest thing. Now, how much does diet composition contribute to that formula for longevity? I don't know. But in terms of the published research, if we're going to go for the gold standard of longevity, and the people that are, exercise fanatics, and again, I'm pro-exercise. Like I said, pro-exercise. I'm doing workouts. I'm throwing around heavy weights. I'm pro-exercise. I don't want anyone to get the idea that I'm anti-exercise by any means. But calorie restriction beats regular exercise in terms of the lifespan, maximum lifespan effect. Average recreational physical activity, or even just voluntary wheel running in rats, for example, just using an animal model, extends average lifespan, just like in people. Elite athletes, and I'll put these studies in the video's description. Elite athletes have an increased average life expectancy compared to the general population. But where are the Olympic athletes at 115? I've said this before. Where are they, right? So there's simultaneously something good and bad about exercise. We want to get them both. Now, going back to the diet, that then knowing that calorie restriction without exercise gets an even greater increase in average lifespan relative to exercise in the animal studies, and increases maximal lifespan. Like I said, the dietary approach that gets us to being able to, and I don't mean a calorie restriction of, your maintenance is 3,000 per day, you're going to eat 1,500 per day. Nobody's going to be able to sustain that. But the published studies show somewhere around, 35% at most, if you can sustain that. And I wouldn't just directly jump to 35%. I mean, for me, it's been a very slow, gradual process over time. And I'm not trying to look like a stick figure. Again, I'm trying to have some amount of muscle mass, right? So, but the calorie amount may be the biggest factor in longevity, right? So, all right. Now that also then gets into the body weight and the BMI component, right? Of the 5 factors, right? Which, okay, is it going to be, some in the Calorie Restriction Society think that a BMI even less than 18.5, which by definition is anorexia, which is not associated with improved health and longevity. Some in the CR Society think that that's going to be better. Now, show me your biomarkers. Show me your markers of organ and systemic function, not just metabolic health or selected cherry-picked data. So, the amount of CR that gets you to a BMI that comprehensively optimizes the net sum of as many organ systems as possible. So then the actual composition that is inherent within that may vary. I mean, maybe some people do better on, I don't know, 60% fat. Some people do better on 10% fat. But again, using the biomarkers as the driving tool. I hear you on all-cause mortality, but there's got to be greater specificity, right? So I know what works for me based on, almost 50 blood tests now since 2015, but there is, I'll give you an example in terms of composition, right? So I've been eating with the goal of getting spermidine and ergothioneine. I've been eating an average of about 300 grams of mushrooms per day for pretty, maybe about a year or so.
Okay.
And I've been doing that on like 3 days a week, where it's like, 700 to 800 grams a day on 3 days, and then basically nothing for the other 3 days. Now, inherent in that isn't just spermidine and ergothioneine, which may extend lifespan based on the animal studies, or ergothioneine extended lifespan in flies. There aren't mouse data yet. But besides mushrooms containing those 2 metabolites, they are also a rich source of niacin. Now, knowing that NAD and the bioenergetics and obviously mitochondrial function, NAD being a big component of that as it's in the TCA cycle. So if your NAD levels are low, you're going to have suboptimal TCA cycle function, potentially suboptimal mitochondrial function. And we all know how mitochondrial function declines during aging, probably is going to be a bad thing for quality of life, average and maximal lifespan. So knowing that mushrooms are a great source of niacin, my niacin intake has been 2.5 times the RDA for a very long time, as long as I've had mushrooms in the diet. So when I measured NAD, I didn't expect it to be relatively low or quote unquote aged in the 20 micromolar range, 20 to 25 micromolar. How's that possible? My niacin intake is, this much. I'm getting it from mushrooms and sardines, and, it's a mix of plant and animal. So knowing that nicotinic acid, which is also a niacin, one of the two main niacin isoforms, with nicotinamide being the other, knowing that nicotinamide supplementation in very low doses increases my NAD suggests to me that the niacin that I'm getting from mushrooms is not nicotinic acid, but potentially nicotinamide. Now, another aspect of this story is that nicotinamide has been shown to increase homocysteine more than nicotinic acid. My homocysteine levels have been pretty close to age expected, which for me, that's like,
do better than that. Yeah.
Not just that, for me, that's like an offensive slur, hearing the words, your theta is age expected, right? So knowing that my mushroom intake has been high to try to get these potentially pro-longevity substances, while potentially increasing my levels of nicotinamide, which may be bad for the homocysteine, now I've cut the mushroom intake down by a little bit. So this gets to the idea of specificity within the diet. And now I don't know what the effect is on homocysteine yet. We'll see how that goes for the next test, because this is a relatively recent change. Now, conversely, because I've cut the mushrooms down a little bit, and knowing that B12 is one of the components that's been shown, or it correlates in my data strongly with reducing homocysteine. And I'm just using homocysteine as an example. I'm not trying to say this is the biggest, metabolite to measure. It's just as an example. So folate and B12 combine to convert homocysteine into methionine. So knowing that I've increased B12, I've been increasing my folate by a small amount, just titrating it up. And again, my folate intake is an average of about 1,000 micrograms per day, which again is 2.5 times the RDA. But it may not be enough for whatever reason, background genetics, whatever it may be. So, just that specificity of, all right, I've cut the mushrooms down, potentially reducing nicotinamide, that should alleviate some of that potential effect of nicotinamide on homocysteine, while also increasing my folate even further than 2.5 times the RDA to try to bring homocysteine further down. This is what I mean about the, biomarker-driven approach and really trying to titrate the amounts. And just the last bit, I know I can talk forever, but your friend's giving you a hard time about your, the diet rigidity, right?
Yep.
If you're a farmer, you want the best crop yield, and to have the best crop yield is going to have a specific formula. And I'd imagine that every year, if you're a new farmer, there's probably a learning process where you're learning, okay, what's the soil composition? What's my crop yield? How much water is there? What's the pH of the whole system? What are the factors that are really driving my crop yield? For us and everybody, the crop yield is longevity, right? And I don't want to say stumbled, but I've through trial and error and many testing and rigorous evaluation and interventions and all this stuff, the biomarkers are mostly youthful, right? So I know the dietary composition, that correlates best with that full profile. So for me, it's, I don't want to mess it up. I want my best crop yield, and so I'm happy to, and it's a diet that makes me happy. If I wasn't satiated and, and comfortable on it, it would be hard to maintain forever. For example, if you said eat ground flax seeds, which basically look and taste like sawdust every day for the rest of your life, that'd be a bit of a challenge, right? But mix it with stuff, and some days I can eat it by itself, so so I enjoy it, and it's a part of the approach, being helping me to keep my body weight relatively lean, and being satiated. So that's the long story on the diet and the rigidity of it, and only having occasional cheat meals. So
it's interesting. So I like the it's funny you say that you think the diet is the most important, but then you point to something that I think is actually I'm not sure if it's outside or if it's different, but basically you're saying the overall calorie intake you feel is one of the key drivers.
Definitely.
And I've been watching my blood pressure as well. And I'm kind of like, well, let's see, 125 over 80. Is that great? I mean, it's probably okay now, but as you say, that's not one that goes down as you get older. Um, but my youthful sort of handling and the way that I control my weight is not through daily measurements, but rather through fasting. So I follow the 5-2 system. So on my days where I'm eating, I just eat whatever I want, basically. But 2 days a week, I'm on under 500 calories. And that's rigorous and done every week or so. I've been doing it for about 10 years now. And we've had some discussion before about, okay, well, it's not exactly clear in the animal studies where they say calorie restriction leads to longer life, whether that's actually the calorie restriction or whether it's very effectively they're getting fasting because they're only being fed during the office hours of the interns who are feeding them. And I think the jury's still out on that one. As you pointed out, there are some studies that seem to imply the other way. Um, but yeah, it's a key thing. But like from the all-cause mortality studies, the weight stuff seems there are the confounders, right? So people who are exceptionally thin are oftentimes really skinny because they're dying, right? So it's hard to clean the data and get that out. And for a while, it looked like they were saying that people actually who are kind of middleweight, like BMI of 25, seem to live longer, even slightly overweight. And then they said, okay, well, let's take out the people who are sickly or whatever and other things. But there was much ado about that. And when I see kind of that back and forth and kind of like, no, it's not this way, it's this way, and both of them are kind of showing it, and basically the line's not moving much, the conclusion I draw from that is it's not that big of a deal. Like there's no clear winner on that one, right? Like,
So I can add more specificity to that, right? So yeah,
okay,
there are some published studies showing that a BMI at older ages, I think it's in the overweight range, 25 to
yep,
30, is the lowest risk on that J-shaped curve, right? So
right,
um, I could actually probably rationalize some aspect of that. Immune function declines during aging. So fat actually has an antimicrobial component to it. So fat actually can secrete cathelicidin, which is an antimicrobial protein. So I'd imagine that for people who experience an age-related, well, I should say, for people that experience, I mean, basically everybody will experience it, right? At some point, the age-related immune function decline. But
right.
for me, it makes sense that, okay, age-related immune function decline, fat mass is potentially compensatory to help the immune system. As another factor of that, cholesterol follows the LDL and total cholesterol follows that same pattern where it increases to about midlife and immune function declines, similarly up to about, well, indefinitely. But cholesterol also has an immune enhancing properties as it can bind to things like lipopolysaccharide, which can leak into the blood during aging. So, but then, like you mentioned, then after about 50 to 60, cholesterol declines, and now you're on the road to the slow drive to death because you've got the age-related decline for immune function, and then you don't have cholesterol to potentially compensate. So an increase in body fatness, and I'm not saying that's the way to do it, but for people in that category who have an age-related immune function decline, it may be that fat is potentially acting as a compensatory mechanism to try to help the immune system. So
Interesting.
now that said, what if there was a healthy control group? So from youth, stayed lean their whole life, that I think that's a big, missing drawback is that the healthy, lean basically since youth control group doesn't exist. So, now going back to specificity. So one can do the experiment to see just even at the individual level, if your BMI is 28 and you lose weight over some period of time. And for me, I think doing slower is better. That's going to be the safest way. You're going to be able to maintain those habits for a long time. If you've done it slow and steady versus you lose it all in 2 months and then what's going to happen? Have you learned any habits or you just starved yourself?
Stop eating, and then you're going to eventually need to eat again, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you looked at the full panel of biomarkers, blood pressure, all of the full list, kidney, liver, immune, red blood cells, inflammation, metabolic health, etc. If you took that same person at a BMI of 28, even a fit 28, right? Fit BMI of 28, relatively fit with some amount of body fat, because I can't imagine unless you're a bodybuilder on some amount of steroids, to have a BMI of 20. It's going to be very hard to be natural. I don't know. People
Yeah.
are going to come at me now. I'm 5'7", 215, and my body fat is 5%. I'm not talking about people like that. Most people that have a BMI of 28, even with a fitness lifestyle, probably going to have some amount of body fat, maybe 15, 20% for a man. Okay, regardless. Now, if you cut your body weight over time, now get your BMI to, I don't know, 23, 24, and look at your biomarkers, I bet, at least seeing my own data, and I'm going to put this in a video at some point. I mean, body weight is behind almost everything. I mean, it's,
Wow.
yeah. But again, does that mean eat garbage? And eat, some professional athletes, the notorious candy eaters, and they're lean and fit, but then they maybe have short careers, right? So, it's calorie restriction with optimal nutrition. That's the goal. But then the question is, what's the optimal nutrition? How do you define that? Which then goes to the biomarkers. Now, going to the fasting, this is a big one, right? So going to the published studies, I'm pretty sure there's no trifecta of this combination, fasting, calorie restriction, and circadian alignment in people. I'm pretty sure that data on all-cause mortality doesn't exist yet. But there's a study, and I have a video on this, where, like you said, the calorie restricted animals, they eat all of their food within a very short window, and then they're basically fasted for the rest of the day. And then if they were calorie restricted on that most of the day fasting approach and ate their food, for mice, they are nocturnal, which means they should be eating at night, not during the day, which is when lab studies have basically bent their physiology to accommodate us, right? We're going to put the mice on, keep them awake during the day, keep them awake at the day and let them sleep at night, but they actually evolve the opposite of that. So when you allow that trifecta, let them eat at night as they evolved to do, fasted about 35%, calorie restriction and fasted, they had about a 35% extension of lifespan, the longest lifespan relative to not circadian alignment and not fasting. So that could be a potentially big part of this too. I incorporate the fasting every day. I try to have that eating window less than 8 hours. On 3 days a week, it's almost all of my calories, maybe 90%, is an hour and a half in the morning, and then just the remaining 10% in the afternoon. So the vast majority of it is in a very short window. So I do try to incorporate that. Now, in terms of biomarkers, I don't see a difference with that approach versus the way it used to be, where I'd basically eat, do one meal a day, 4 in the afternoon until 6, and then, and so basically I don't see any difference in the biomarkers there. In terms of sleep quality, it's immeasurably better, trying to get that eating window and finishing it earlier in the day. And that's the main reason why I do it, is it improves sleep quality for me, less nighttime awakenings. Like if I'm eating a giant, vegetable filled meal at 6 o'clock, I'm up at 10, 12, 2. I mean, I'm up every 2 hours using the bathroom, which is terrible. So.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that you didn't actually find much of a difference based off the time of day, or even the restriction is from the biomarker point of view.
But I should say though that before every blood test, I do about a 17-hour fast, and I don't know why I settled on that. It's just for the early blood test, I noted that it was 17 hours since I ate. So I basically stayed consistent with that. So it could be that for the earlier test in 2015, even with the later eating style and not eating all of my calories earlier in the day, it could be that for whatever reason before the test, it could be that maybe one day of a 17-hour window, which is longer than the standard 8 to 12-hour window fasting, maybe that had some impact on standardizing the blood test data. I don't know. I doubt that that's the case, but I don't see gross differences.
Well, it's interesting that you point out that shift. I mean, a lot of people, when they get into the time restricted feeding, the first thing they do is skip breakfast. And it's one of those, they say I should eat breakfast, but I don't, and it's easier and it's so great. And the studies on that are bad. They had a study where they actually looked at the effects of skipping breakfast versus not. And they found, first of all, your metabolism slows down by about 50 calories a day. Secondly, the people who were skipping breakfast reported more hunger throughout the day, so they were more unhappy. And thirdly, they reported them as wanting to eat junkier foods. Like they wanted to eat more kind of chips and sort of things that you'd like to stay away from more. So that's one of the sort of pitfalls of it. And in the short term, if you've gotten used to eating 3 meals a day and then you start skipping breakfast, yes, you'll lose some weight, but they find that to be short term. And if you look at people who have been skipping breakfast over a longer period of time, they're heavier. They generally tend to be more overweight. So it's impressive that you've shifted from like sort of the evening to the breakfast time and weighting it heavy there. And that's probably one of the reasons why you've been able to keep this up for so long.
Yeah, well, it was an easy change because sleep quality has always been an issue, right? So
Hmm.
like I did one of my next videos coming probably next Wednesday is on slow wave sleep, right? So deep sleep, uh,
Hmm.
ought to be restorative sleep. So I did a sleep study probably 10 years ago, and
Huh.
uh, and I was getting terrible sleep back then. And my slow wave sleep was 5% of the total. Now, to put that into perspective, slow wave sleep percentage declines during aging, and for a 90-year-old, the average is 8% of total sleep time. So under the best conditions, I got 5% of my total sleep as slow wave sleep, which is terrible. Now I'm pretty close to 25%. So
Wow.
and what
Huh.
correlates with that too is body weight, which is crazy. So one component, there are others, so but so the shift from, 1 meal a day, eating later in the day to getting it earlier in the day, once I saw that I was waking up less, I was feeling a bit better, not perfectly better, but still
Hmm.
I saw improvements in my, how do I feel, and do I feel more well rested? So that it was an easy shift. And plus, with the in-person work schedule, I don't like to eat at work. Like, so it
Huh.
and the other interesting thing about this too is that so calorie restricted mice, as you mentioned, they eat the majority of their food within like a couple hours, or within a few hour window, and then they're
Mhm.
fast the whole day. But they know the next day when their food should be there, and they're waiting and eager to eat their food. When I wake up, it's use the bathroom, it's go straight to eat, and I'm eating for like an hour and a half if it's an in-person work day. And I look forward to it, right? So yeah, and it's
Yeah,
not.
it's vegetables and fruit. That takes so long to eat. Oh my
Well,
gosh.
yeah, that's true. Well, for people who don't know, I'm not vegan. I've actually had like 5 eggs a week now for I've incorporated that, and I eat dairy every day and sardines every day. So I'm not far from vegan, right? But when you say all the fruits and
Pescatarian.
vegetables, uh, yeah, I get lacto ovo, I guess, right?
Pescatarian.
Yeah, but I'm open to meat, right? It's just it doesn't satiate me as much as the other animal products, and it doesn't impact the biomarkers too as much. So.
Huh. So do you see that when you take well, you don't have any red meat in your routine. One of the things that your routine is very well focused. And I was trying to tell you, you should like mess around a lot more to get more data on it. But I know you're like, no, I got the ship is steered. I don't need to like yank the rudder. I'm like, but there's science we would find there. Come on.
Yeah, so Ginfinity suggests that. So that's I mentioned that's going to be one of, not along the diet lines, but so that 600 milligrams of nicotinic acid, we saw my NAD go up to like 3x higher, 67 micromolar, but then my Dunedin pace was 0.98, which I've had nothing even close to that forever, like 9 tests. So
Mhm.
when I suggested that it could be NAD too high, he was like, no, it's probably a niacin or nicotinic acid. Your nicotinic acid was too high, right? So
Right.
when he suggested, all right, let's raise your NAD with NMN, which is also
Hmm.
nicotinamide in the niacin family. Um, this is almost like for the sake of science. For me, it's like, okay, 60 milligrams of nicotinic acid. I got 38 micromolar. Let's see what
Uh-huh.
it does to Dunedin pace. And let's see what it does to the rest of the biomarkers. For me, story closed. But to have to prove the point, I'm not. And no disrespect to Ginfinity, I'm a big fan, but
Uh-huh.
I, the creative process is being disturbed to prove a point, so yeah, getting me to tweak around with, add more of this, add more of that. It's got to be
So
data driven.
so my most recent, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this yet, perturbation of my schedule for the science and to see what it does to me. So I've registered for a marathon, which is well over the 15 minutes of running a week. So I've just started a 16-week plan actually to get ready for it. And I'm quite nervous about it. I think my VO2 max is quite good. I've had it measured. It was about 55, which is outstanding, with the full mask on and plotting on a treadmill, and every 30 seconds they goose the speed to see if you can keep up with it. But a real marathon's a real marathon, so we'll see. I got
So that
myself some jumpy shoes.
so that
Mhm.
raises the question, right? So with
Uh-huh.
marathon training, that's going to most likely be a volume increase, right? A training volume increase over what you're doing now. So with
Yep.
that in mind, you should get some VO2 max increase, whether it's going from 55 to 60. And you should mention that it's not a predicted 55, like fitness tracker predicted 55. This is the mask. This was official thing, right? So
Yep.
you're probably
Gold
going to,
standard.
yes. So you're probably going to get some VO2 max boost, right? 55 to 60, I don't know, somewhere, it should be somewhere higher. I'd hard to believe an increase in training volume, you're going to stay the same at what your VO2 max was before. Now, with that in mind, with that increase in training volume, will your and improvement of VO2 max, will your heart rate variability go down, resting heart rate go up chronically for that increase in training volume time? Now,
Mm-hmm.
so now it raises the interesting question, which I've gotten criticism from endurance athletes because, they'll say, well, it's VO2 max. That's the most important. Who cares about your heart rate variability or resting heart rate being a bit worse? Doesn't matter. I don't care about those metrics. I care about the functional measures. So what do you think about the dichotomy of, having your VO2 max be the highest, but you may take a hit on your actual metrics of, cardiovascular fitness, and health, right? So
Yeah, it's I'll find out some of that experientially. I just started now because of this. I'm like fully, censored up now. I've got my Whoop, I've got an Aura ring that I just bought this last week, and I've got my Apple Watch. And so now I can have like votes, right? Like what was the most important thing? What's your actual heart rate? And it's a little bit of experience getting used to it. I'm thinking about writing a review or something on it. Maybe we can have that one of our discussions later.
cool.
Um, but it's the VO2 max is, they have the studies for the ACM, and I all cause mortality. I think I've seen it also for the heart rate, the resting heart rate as well, right? That's another one where it's sort of a known thing, and I'd have to look into it, but I'm not sure. I don't have an answer on that one yet.
So like maybe in the short term on your most recovered day, right? So say you're
Mhm.
doing a few days of training, high volume training for your marathon, and then you have like a recovery day, right? So
Mhm.
I'd imagine that after your recovery day, if your best resting heart rate was, I think you showed me it was like 41 the other day, right? If your
Mhm.
best is 41, and then you're doing the marathon training, and then your best after a recovery day is 44, right?
Mhm.
So now you're getting a potential, and this goes to that idea of exercise dose, right? This is how I see it. Sure, you may be getting some incremental increase in VO2 max, but if that's at the detriment of, so if your resting heart rate is going up and your heart rate variability is going down, that's basically a sign that you're stressing your body to the point where your autonomic and your parasympathetic nervous system are somewhat out of whack. Now, how will that translate into disease risk and longevity? I don't know, but I'd imagine your metrics of, I think you'd want the highest VO2 max with the highest heart rate variability and lowest resting heart rate. Does that mean training for a marathon will get you there? I don't know. Does that mean training 2 hours a day, 2 miles a day, walking, running, whatever? I don't know. It's individual, right?
But this is one of those places where you and I differ. For I think that I am in the punch it and improve it over the long run, whereas you're like, no, I'm watching it every day. My resting heart rate, if I do this, I know that the next day my resting heart rate, it'll be high for a few days. So that day when I had a triple digit heart rate variability, 103, and a resting heart rate of 41, that was the day after I ran HIIT. Like I had run like 25 minutes a HIIT the day before. And it was a good run. I had new shoes and I was super happy because I've got my marathon shoes that are really bouncy. But I don't know. It will be interesting to see. So maybe we'll have a discussion about that in a later podcast.
Wait, for sure, for sure. But wait, what happened the day after that? Because it went far away from 103 to 41.
Right. So a full switch around, and I'm not actually sure. Like I haven't worn it long enough to kind of know my Whoop to know what's causing that flip around. But the Aura Ring agreed on the second day. So the day after that, then my heart rate went up to 51. And actually my heart rate variability went down to from 103 down to 37 in one day. It's like I'm a different person.
So,
But so that you asked me what I did, I mean, it was kind of a normal day. I went to the gym. I did my half-hour workout. I did some heavy squats, 3 sets of 8 reps of 110 kilograms. Those are big, but that's not big for me. I mean, that's a normal kind of my routine. But I had about 7 drinks that night, and that was between like 6 and 11 o'clock at night. So it's probably some dehydration. Um,
alcohol is a known murder of heart rate variability, resting heart rate. That's the whole that drove the whole ship. Like you can't go from average, you can't have an average, I don't remember what it was, like 40 for heart rate variability and 50 for resting heart rate. If that was your average, to
uh-huh,
then see 140 to go
uh-huh,
to elite endurance athlete, no. Like maybe if your averages was 40, 50, maybe at your best you'd see like 50, 46, something like that. So,
Hmm.
all right. So then that also raises the question, knowing that, was that your best data that you've seen so far, 100 to
Well,
40?
I mean, in like the 2 weeks I've had it, but yes.
So with that in mind, then it gets to, okay, how many drinks can you tolerate where instead of your average, I think I saw your average was like 60 something and in the 40s for resting heart rate over the one
Mhm,
week average, right?
mhm.
So what amount of alcohol, because alcohol is murder, like I said, of those data, what amount of alcohol, is it 2 drinks? Is it 1 drink? Is it 3 drinks? Where you're not crushing yourself physiologically. I mean, the physical enjoyment of that many drinks for sure, but the physiological detriment, right?
Uh-huh.
So how many drinks can you can actually titrate the dose where you're not overstressing yourself, right? So that you can almost always see that 100, because your metrics should be better than mine chronically. I shouldn't, with my exercise duration and how many steps you're taking, I shouldn't have, but granted, the good news is at my best, I'm not too far away from where you were, right? So,
Uh-huh.
but with some titrating and some tweaking, your data will chronically be 100 over 40, which is amazing. As youthful as you can pretty much get.
But that day, for example, you say titrating, so I can already tell you on that day, I had a beer that evening, right? That was my fasting day, my day where I did the high intensity interval training, and then had a 1 can of beer before at about 6, or actually no, about 8 o'clock before I went to bed. So somewhere between 1 and 7,
Yeah.
there seems to be a steep J curve in there. We'll see. I'm not. It also, I was staying in. I was traveling at the time, so I was staying in an uncomfortable, unfamiliar area bed. So that might have also had some effect on it. But it's good to have the data. Now I just need some more data so I can figure out what the keys are.
So one weakness of Whoop is I'd recommend tracking it in a spreadsheet because I think they provide data like, year to year, like here's your yearly data and you can visually see it. But
Uh
if you
huh.
actually wanted to track your own data over time, I mean, sure, you could go back and look at it, but to look at correlations, I don't know, maybe you could use their journal, but if you're not manually recording it, you won't be able to go back in time. Like for
Doesn't have an
example,
X. There's no export on it.
I don't think so. And
Okay.
so for example, the respiratory rate, the nighttime respiratory rate, which is on there. So I only have like, I don't know, 3 years of data, but I've been wearing it for 5 years. It doesn't go back all the way. And there maybe even be a shorter window than that where I wasn't recording it manually and it's not available on their website, right? So
Mhm.
I'd record it in case it disappears, so
Okay. Right.
if you want to calculate correlations, which I think would be super interesting, you know,
I want to see. I want to see. Yeah. Well, I look to see the history too. So okay.
like how many drinks is it where it doesn't affect your data, right? I don't know.
Uh-huh.
If it's just one
Useful.
beer, clearly, I wonder what it would be like no alcohol at all. If I mean, granted, one beer could have no impact, one beer could have some moderate impact. But if there
Hmm.
was, is your best truly 103 over 41, or is it 115 over 38? I don't know, right? So
But that's where I pull back from the biomarkers as the final arbiter, right? I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm having beers. Like, I mean, it's funny, right? I mean, if you look at those numbers, you'd say it was a different person, right? Like I should have been laid out, like I should have been, lying on my couch the whole day. But okay, I'm maybe a little tired or so, but I didn't. If I'd have had a workout today, I'd have done the workout just as I normally do.
Yeah.
So
For
I
me,
don't I don't adjust based off of what this readiness thing. I'm kind of like, well, it's interesting, but if I have a workout scheduled, I'm doing the workout.
you have the lucky genetic lottery physiology, because I can tell the difference between
Huh.
if my data did that. Oh, geez, like, and it maybe it's placebo, maybe it's a real effect, but for whatever reason, I wouldn't say minor deviations affect me, but knowing that my averages right now are probably 68, 42, if it's
Hmm.
like 50, 50 something and 45, 46, I feel that. I know what it.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Huh.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Cognitively, physically, even my workout. So for example, yesterday it was, I don't know, you saw it was like 80, 81:39. And
Hmm.
that's a great thing because I'm always aiming for that on the morning of a workout. Uh,
Hmm.
The workout, the struggle during a workout, which should be a struggle and a challenge,
Hmm.
is always harder if my data is worse. My metrics are worse on that morning versus if they're almost completely fully recovered. So for me, there's something to it, you know. But if I saw my data cut in half like yours, geez, I'd be on the couch, like, leave me alone, don't talk to me, yeah. So
Yeah, just went up and went on my day. I'm like, oh, that's weird.
I wish I had. It's fantastic. Good news for you.
So far. Yep.
All
Okay.
right. So we covered a lot. We could probably go on
Yep.
forever, but we'll save it for the next time.
Sounds good. Okay. Great
Thanks,
talking to
Chris.
you.
Ciao.
All right. Thanks.